Welcome to Unpacking Peanuts, the podcast where three cartoonists take an in-depth look at the greatest comic strip of all time, Peanuts by Charles M. Schulz.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. This is Unpacking Peanuts, and we're here in 1986. I'm Jimmy Gownley. I'll be your host for the proceedings. I'm also a cartoonist. I did the Amelia Rules series and books like 7 Good Reasons Not to Grow Up and The Dumbest Idea Ever. And you can read my new comic book, Tanner Rocks, for free at gvillecomics.substack.com, Gville comics.substack.com. Joining me as always are my pals, co-hosts, and fellow cartoonists. First, he's a playwright and a composer, both for the band Complicated People, as well as for this very podcast. He's the co-creator of the original comic book price guide, the original editor for Amelia Rules, and the creator of such great strips as Strange Attractors, A Gathering of Spells, and Tangled River. It's Michael Cohen.
Say hey.
And he's the executive producer and writer of Mystery Science Theater 3000, a former vice president of Archie Comics, and the creator of the Instagram sensation Sweetest Beasts. It's Harold Buchholz.
Hello.
So, guys, we are here. How are you people enjoying our new format of spreading this out over more than 2 episodes? What do you guys think of it so far?
No, I think it's working. Before by the time we get to the end of the year, we were burned out. So if you go back and you count how many picks are from November and December, you'll find out it was way down because we were just so tired and hungry that we
or we picked enough to cover, and then we had to be really judicious at the end. You know, you're less likely to select something maybe.
Yeah, it's more enjoyable. It's not an exhausting chore. It's actually more of a pleasure.
Yeah, the idea was that we might make the episodes a little shorter, but Liz, I don't know if that's actually happening because we always get into these conversations.
Yeah, I think the last one was an hour and 45 minutes.
Well, okay, but to be fair, 40 of those minutes has to be me griping. But you can just about just random stuff unrelated, right? I'm sure a lot of that comes right off the top. I don't think I have much to rant about. Oh, I do have one little thing. It's not a rant, actually. So I decided I was going to go ahead and read those Nancy strips for this episode so we could wrap up the big Nancy controversy. We could do that when we hit the mailbox on the second half of this episode. So that's something to look forward to, and I think it'll be fun. I'll talk about what I saw, what I felt as I read the strips, and then I picked one that we can give the Unpacking Peanuts treatment to today.
Sounds good.
Great.
All right. Well, with that preamble out of the way, what do you guys say? Should we just get right back into the strips?
Yep.
Sure.
Jump into it.
Okay. So if you guys out there want to follow along, you can do it this way. You go over to the website unpackingpeanuts.com and you sign up for the Great Peanuts Reread. That will give you 1 email a month from us where you get our little newsletter, and it'll tell you what strips we're going to cover that particular month. And the great thing about the 21st century is no one pays for art anymore. Oh, wait, that's not a great thing. But it is a thing of the 21st century. And because of that, you can go to gocomics.com and read all of this for free, which is really cool. Now, we encourage you to go buy those Fantagraphics books because they're awesome. And, let's give Fantagraphics a little of our coin to support that. But if you're not bougie, you can just read them for free on gocomics.com. So with all that said, let's get back to the strips. Today, we're starting with April 11th. Charlie Brown and Linus are walking along outside. Charlie Brown says, I was watching this movie, where these guys are chasing some other guys in a car. Charlie Brown continues, as they tear around a corner, they knock over a fruit stand and oranges fly all over. Then both cars go roaring off down the road. And then 2 friends sit on a bench contemplating the scene Charlie Brown has described. And Charlie Brown says, no one ever goes back to help pick up the oranges.
I love Charlie Brown. Yes, exactly. Right. I watch these Marvel movies and I see these buildings crumbling and stuff. So don't you think a little about who's in the buildings? It kind of takes the edge,
Well, I mean,
the
when
appeal out of some of these stories where you don't see anybody die. There's no blood, but you know that at least 700,000 people have died during the course of this big
minimum.
fight.
Well, I don't know anything about this, but Marvel did have a comic about the people who go back and clean up the damage afterwards.
Oh yeah, what was that?
Damage control.
Damage control, was that what it was called?
Yeah, they've used them in the movies. The people who really got massive pushback for that, because if you think the Marvel movies are bad, was that Superman movie from about 10 years ago called Man of Steel. I mean, I took my kids to see it, and it was a bleak, unrelenting, just violent ordeal. And like you're saying, like you're watching it, it's like there has to be 2 million people that died in this last fight, and it's a Superman movie.
Wow.
Like if you could, I can sort of even accept that if it's a Hulk movie, if it's whatever, but like Superman,
doesn't he have a code of some sort?
Used to, but all right, with this. We're ranting already. I said I wasn't going to have much to rant about, and I'm like, here's another thing I hate. No, but
well, Charlie Brown started it, so this is legit.
That's true. That's true.
I want to point out here, okay, there's a second character in this strip who says nothing, and that's Linus. But I think in this middle of 1986, Schulz is making a serious commitment to bringing Linus more into the strip.
I was waiting to see if you guys said that.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I really think you're right. And I think he does it with some real success.
Oh, I think it's great.
Yeah, and then just to wrap up this, it's really beautifully drawn. He's got a lovely rock wall behind the first panel. He really gives this particular strip a lot of time, which I think is kind of cool. And sometimes I feel like when he does that, that means that this one is particularly special to him. That's kind of the feeling I get. And and so my feeling is they should do a comic book about people in craft services. I think I'd get that comic.
This tearing around the corner and the oranges flying everywhere, that really was a trope.
It still is.
In those car chase things.
Yeah. Well, the trash cans too, right? They'd have this.
Yeah.
Those later to be used very effectively in WWE wrestling.
Right. April 18th. Okay, so this is a little bit of a sequence where we see Snoopy and his Foreign Legion guys, and we have seen a giant cannonball has rocketed through Snoopy's doghouse, and Charlie Brown is inspecting it, and he says to Snoopy, "That cannonball blew the whole top off your doghouse. But then where did it go?" In the third panel, he says, "I wonder if it hit anything else." And in the last panel, we see the answer to that question. It has crashed through the top of the psychiatry booth, and Lucy is ducked behind the base of the stand, just looking to see if the coast is clear.
Now, this is something he hasn't done before. I don't think he's using. There's 3 strips in a row with essentially the same punchline, set up in punchline, but he uses the 3 iconic sites. I mean, there aren't a whole lot of iconic sites, but there's the doghouse, there's the psychiatry booth, and there's the piano.
Yeah.
And so we picked one more just to show that he's like stretching this gag for 3 days.
And that one is this. April 19th. Charlie Brown and Snoopy back at the doghouse. They're reiterating what has come before. Charlie Brown says, "That cannonball destroyed your roof." Then they're at the psychiatric stand, and Charlie Brown says, "Then it went through the top of Lucy's psychiatric booth." And then they walk along, and Charlie Brown says to Snoopy, "I wonder where it finally landed." And then we see it, like Michael says, it has landed right on top of Schroeder's toy piano.
Crushing it.
They're crushing it.
Yeah. Now, if you had to figure a fourth one, is there a fourth one?
Baseball?
Well, the mound.
The wall.
The mound, maybe.
The stone wall.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a generic stone wall. I assume they're everywhere.
Right.
I don't know.
That might be it.
I don't know if there is a fourth.
Oh, the school desks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's probably like 100 that we're not thinking of right now.
Sure, and the school wall and the
Yep, right.
and the benches outside the school for lunch.
In the playground. April 26th. Rerun is sitting with his little Jack-in-the-Box, and for 2 panels we see him happily cranking it along until in the 3rd panel, the little Jack-in-the-Box pops up, and it's a little girl Jack-in-the-Box. It's a Jill-in-the-Box, I guess. And then in the last panel, in the 3rd panel, giving the little Jill-in-the-Box a big smile with a heart, Rerun says, "I fall in love too easy."
Oh, I fell in love with that little Jill-in-the-Box. It's so adorable.
It's a great, great little cartoon drawing.
Or he sings it.
But not that big easily.
Oh, is it? Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm sure this is the song that he was thinking of this song. So maybe that was the melody.
I don't know what song. I can't pick up what song.
I fall in love too easily.
From Guys and Dolls, I believe.
No, I don't think so.
Is
No,
that
it's
Guys
not
and
Guys
Dolls?
and Dolls.
No.
No. I know because I played Sky Masterson in high school. Whatever. Just the Brando row. I got it because of just like Brando for my brilliant singing ability.
Yeah.
So how can you tell this is? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I can't. I'm just going by I'm assuming you're going to ask. How can I tell it's Rerun?
Yeah. Are there any clues? Are there any hints whatsoever?
No.
This is Rerun and not Linus in his design?
It might not be. It could be Linus for all I know. But I just know because of the Jack-in-the-Box being something that's associated with Rerun.
Yeah.
So the hair isn't just a little bit more kempt, or it's weird to me that Schulz would not change something.
It's a weird decision.
It just is such a strange choice.
It's a very strange choice. But he went with the shirt. So if he went with the shirt, he was going all in on this thing.
Because that shirt screams Linus to me.
Later we end up Rerun has a different hairstyle. It's like that bird's nest hairstyle,
right?
And overalls. Because I think once he got to the point that he was really intrigued with Rerun as a character, he realized it simply doesn't work to have 2 characters in a black and white comic strip that look exactly alike. No. Right? Unless they're always next to each other, and that's the bit.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And you can tell, Judd, you don't know how big this Jack-in-the-Box is. So, size, there'd be a difference.
Yeah, that's maybe
right. Yeah, but as you say, you can't tell in this one because he's by himself, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway,
maybe this is an unknown 3rd Van Pelt kid. This is happening up in the attic. This is syndication after Rerun.
And why did Bopko's the Weasel become the de rigueur Jack-in-the-Box song? How did that happen?
Why is it the worst earworm in the world?
Really? Thank you, Harold.
Yeah, right. I'm always thinking
it does have that beautiful. It's kind of like those endearing young charms in the Bugs Bunny cartoons, the Yosemite Sam or whatever, where it's like do 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 do.
Oh yeah,
it's got
and then and Yosemite Sam's got it wired for the top note, so it's going to blow up Bugs Bunny, and he always hits the wrong note at the end, and then Yosemite Sam's like no varmint. Comes in.
One of the early South Parks did a riff on that where it was singing the high note in "Loving You," and by John Stamos' brother, who was going to, and he can't hit it. So anyway, it's really funny. So the bomb doesn't go off. Same sitch. Okay, so yeah, we got the Zipatone on there. Michael, what are your thoughts on? I think it works on something like this. Unfortunately, when we look at it on Go Comics, sometimes the little halftones that were made from the Zipatone tend to get a little muddy.
Yeah,
but they look much better in the Fantagraphics books.
Yeah, well, it's not, I don't think that it looks bad. But he's particular objects he's decided are Zipatone. So right now there's only like 3 objects that get it.
Beanbag chairs, right? That's a big one.
Wouldn't that have been amazing if he had gotten into a whole thing with a Jack-in-the-Box, and there's like 16 Jack-in-the-Box strips every year? Oh. That would be incredible.
Well, look, I mean, have no idea what's going to attract his attention. Spike being an amazing example of something that I think fascinates him more than it fascinated most of his readers. And at this point, that was okay with him.
Right. But it sounds like he was probably getting some nice spike letters in the mail to keep him going.
Yeah. I'm a fan. May 13th. Snoopy is out with the Beagle Scouts, and I will name them in honor of our listener last week. It is Conrad, Olivier, Woodstock, and the other one.
Harriet.
Oh, is Harriet?
I don't know
Harriet.
if the Harriet's there anymore.
No more Harriet?
I don't
I
think so.
I think she comes back.
Okay.
I think so. But this also is the area of Peanuts that I'm the least familiar with, would probably be this decade. I think I'm even more familiar with the 90s than I am of this stuff. Like, here's something that a few episodes I said, boy, Lucy's gardening, when I think of the 80s, that's a big thing. And here we are in 1986, and it happened once. In my memory, it was like, oh my God, every other week was Lucy gardening.
Huh.
So who knows? So anyway, May 13th, they're wandering around. Snoopy and the Beagle Scouts are wandering around, and Snoopy says, "A good outdoors person learns to predict the weather." He then stops and turns to the Beagle Scouts and says, "Can anyone tell me what the weather is going to be today?" One of the scouts answers, and Snoopy affirms, "Fair and warmer. Amazing. Tell us how you knew that." And then in the last panel, we see he picked it up from, they had walked by one of those newspaper boxes. We put a quarter in and get a paper. So that's where the Beagle Scout got it.
The Beagle Scouts have made a big comeback, and one of our listeners, Rob Boots, who is the director of the Snoopy Show, has just released the Camp Snoopy television show.
Cool. Wow. All Beagle Scouts all the time.
There you go. It's a great idea.
50th anniversary.
Nice.
I was just thinking the Tulsa Daily World, I think was the name of the Tulsa morning paper, I believe.
It seems like I don't know. It feels like, I guess it has to do with whatever they thought people were going for the paper for, but like it seems so not, I think of newspapers really being so localized. Maybe it's just because I grew up in a small town or whatever. It seems like the Daily World is promising a lot for a newspaper.
Yeah, you got to have them to spend those 2 cents to get that.
I guess that's true.
Newspaper, burning a hole in your pocket.
May 28th, Charlie Brown is standing atop the pitcher's mound in a swimsuit and baseball cap. And he says, "I feel ridiculous." Lucy says, "Hold it," as she snaps a picture of him. And then in panel 2, as she's, forwarding the film in her camera, she says, "This is for our school paper, Charlie Brown. It's our annual swimsuit issue." And in panel 3, Charlie Brown is posing with his terrible pitching form. And he says, "Who'd want to see pictures of baseball players in swimsuits?" And then in the last panel, we see Snoopy wearing an old-fashioned, turn of the 20th century bathing suit, thinking to himself, "It'll be a sellout."
Well, I was glad to see Lucy back in her role as a school reporter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we haven't seen that in a long time. I always thought that would have been a great idea.
Oh, a great idea.
Yeah.
There is something funny about Charlie Brown, especially that third panel where he's like clearly posing as a pitcher. It's just funny and ridiculous.
I think the little crease in the stomach is what's weird. It kind of implies he's got a little pot belly or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's funny. I mean, for those really younger listeners, this was a big deal. It's still, I guess, a minor deal that the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue would come out. It used to be a weekly magazine. And this was the thing. It started in 1964 and was huge. They claim that it helped make the bikini a legitimate apparel on the beach. So,
but in the 90s, when we were self-publishing, a lot of comics were doing swimsuit issues.
Oh, that's right. That was a big thing. Or Amazing Heroes used to do one every year.
Yeah.
So then firemen and policemen got in on things, and It's everywhere.
I always felt there was a deep sadness connected to those comic book swimsuit issues. Like that. Do you know what I mean? No judgment, but
desperation there.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably one of the quickest, easiest comics to put out. Is everybody draw a drawing you can sell for $700 at the next convention you go to. Turn it in. You got a comic book. But yes, Snoopy's old-fashioned striped over the shoulders swimsuit is great.
You know what's really weird? You know how I didn't know it was Olivier for 40 years? I thought it was Oliver. I actually remembered this, and I remember this punchline, and I thought I just read it wrong. I thought it was, I'll be a sellout. Just read it wrong.
Interesting.
I kind of like it my way.
Yeah.
I'll be a sellout.
That last panel was a Rorschach test for you, Jimmy.
Yeah, exactly. May 31st. Linus is nestled down in his beanbag watching some TV, and Lucy comes in with a plate of cookies and says, "Care for a cookie?" Linus freaks out in panel 2, yelling, "It's coconut, isn't it? It's coconut!" Then he really freaks out in panel 3, ducking back into the beanbag chair, yelling, "Take it away! Take it away!" And then he peeks up in the 4th panel saying, "I can tell right away if I'm in the same room with a coconut cookie." Good to see Schultz's hatred of coconut is continuing well into the 80s.
A callback from the 50s where the slightest bit of coconut and candy, people would like flip out.
Yeah, so you can smell it, right? You can just smell it from far away.
Like you with white truffles.
Yeah.
It's not like those oatmeal raisin cookies that try to pass themselves off as chocolate chip cookies.
All right, that is though a challenge. I have the recipe for the best oatmeal raisin cookies in the world. They're my Nana's. They're so good. They're so good that when I make them, they're good. You know,
wow,
right?
Yeah.
That's how foolproof this recipe is.
So are they crunchy? Are they soft or what chewy?
They're I would say chewy. They're chewy, but they hold together when you dunk. They're so good that I made them and left out the flour, right? Which in a cookie, kind of a big component. They were still good.
Wow.
It was like more of a candy, a crackle, but it was still good.
Wow.
June 6th. It's the end of the school year. Peppermint Patty is leaving the building, and Marcy's waiting for her at the bottom of the steps. Marcy says, "How did you do on your final report card, sir?" And Peppermint Patty says, "I squeaked through in math, I squeaked through in reading, and I squeaked through in spelling." Then, with pure joy in panel 3, she says, "I can't believe it." And then she walks home, hands raised in triumph, saying, "Squeak, squeak, squeak." There is no joy greater, I think, than that first day of summer vacation. Because then you're like all that stress, all the stuff you're worried for. Even if you just squeaked by, at least it's over for months. Oh, that's pure bliss.
That was an amazing feeling. Yeah. Knowing you've got months away from this. And you what you're coming back to is usually different than what you left. Yeah. So you get a fresh start. You know, how often do you get that? Everything seems to just have continuity. These things that are big parts of our lives. It just keeps going and going and going and going. But school,
and these kids get shipped off to camp, so that screws everything.
Well, right. Oh well.
Yeah, great feeling. It's very strange because I was thinking about it. It's like my kids only have one summer vacation left after this one.
Oh,
in their whole life.
Isn't that weird? I don't say that out loud because
unless they become teachers and they get summer.
No, that's true. Right. That's not happening with either of them, though. I assure you. Really good, and I feel like he is more interested in the drawing just in general than even he was maybe in the 70s. It feels like, you know, he's putting a little extra effort to put that chain link fence in, you know, then we see that little like dog fence or whatever it is. Yeah, and I'm not just in this one, but I'm seeing it throughout, like seeing those bricks in the first one. Yeah, I just feel like whether he's into it more or whether he's just taking more of his time because he has to, I think it's a good looking year. June 9th. It's lunchtime at school. Wait. How can it be lunchtime at school? Pepper and Patty just got out of school.
No, we don't.
So you know what?
Do we?
Well,
we absolutely know that.
No, we don't. Here's what we're going to say it is. This is how the Girardville summer started. They would do free lunch for kids, like anyone under 13 or 14 or whatever it was, could go to the playground and they would have free lunch for kids every day. And so we would meet there and get our bologna sandwich and juice and I think string cheese or apple slices or something. And then that's how we would start our day. We would then play for the rest of the day. So that's what I'm assuming is happening here. They're just going for a little community free lunch.
Or it could be summer school.
Could be a class. Could be all kinds of options here. But anyway, a very cute little girl is sitting on a bench and Linus comes up to her and they're both holding their lunches in paper sacks. And Linus says, "Hi, my name is Linus. May I sit with you and eat lunch?" And the little girl says, "I don't know. When were you born?" Linus says, "I was born in October." And the little girl says, "I was born in December." And then she looks at Linus in the last panel and says, "Aren't you kind of old for me?"
I love this whole sequence.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah, it gives Linus something to do, being the older man. Anyway, it's funny. And this character never gets named.
Yes, it does.
Even though she's got a whole week. She is?
This is Lydia.
All right. Does she appear later?
Oh, yes. Yes. I also think she might possibly be a genius because she has now made Linus utterly fascinated, even though Linus has really just asked to sit down and eat lunch.
Right.
She has implied all this stuff by just saying, "I'm kind of old for me." And that works. And Linus then does become obsessed with proving that he is not old for her. Too old for her. I think it's very funny.
She's figured this guy out just the first look. Yeah.
As both a young male growing up in the 80s and as a cartoonist to this day, I love the good hairband.
Yeah, it looks really, really nice. I like the design. I like the way he's shading her hair. Just slightly different. How Lucy has her kind of black with not filled out all the way to the edges. He's doing something similar here with her, and it looks really nice.
And it's interesting because he's done characters with like a bob before. I guess this is kind of like a long bob, but it's definitely a different look.
Mm-hmm.
He has a lot of variation in these character designs, which are all essentially very, very similar.
Yeah.
And this continues. June 17th, Charlie Brown intervenes on his friend's behalf and says to Lydia, "May I speak to you about my friend here? I think you're wrong about his being too old for you. In many ways," Charlie Brown continues, "he's still quite young." And then in the last panel, he says, "I mean, you should see him with his blanket." To which Linus says, "Og!" as he yells to the heavens. And Lydia makes she just touches her chin in surprise.
The considering pose, right?
Yes, that's a great way to say it. A considering pose. I love this strip because I love that it brings up the blanket.
Yeah.
It'll continue. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. I love Charlie Brown coming in and trying to help out his friend, being a wingman here. Real cute.
Yeah, it looks really nice. And he's got a character with black hair, and there's a lot more blacks in this year. He's really trying to add some variety to the line art that he's got, and it works really well.
And I think we'll probably have one of these examples coming up, but in one of our recent episodes, we were talking about how those dark, poolish shadows sort of indicate the kids walking around their house at night, which he hadn't done in for 30 years. And then suddenly he discovered that technique and he uses it a bunch this year. And it really does convey atmosphere. It's an interesting thing because it's just a complete abstract smudge.
Yeah, and then his line art is a little thicker. Now, of course, we're looking at the Go comics, which are, for whatever reason, reproductions that thicken the line. But the strip is designed to be read smaller than the older strips, which were, even though they were the space-saving comic, were still much bigger back in the day than they are now in these 1986 newspapers. So yeah, he's making the most of it, and this strip particularly looks really nice.
Yeah, really does.
She's tall.
Yeah, tall for her age. Being so young and all.
I like the little plaid pants.
Yeah.
You can almost tell that they're made of polyester. You know? So the story continues. June 14th. So Charlie Brown and Linus are hanging out at the thinking wall, and Linus says, "So I ordered mint chocolate chip, just like she did." And she said she was surprised. She says most older people order vanilla. What she really meant was she thinks I'm dull and boring. Charlie Brown and Linus think about this in the third panel. Linus looking very annoyed. Charlie Brown just contemplating it. And in the last panel, Charlie Brown says, "I've always liked vanilla," which makes Linus roll his eyes. I love vanilla. I have no shame.
Yeah,
I think that's your baseline. If you can do vanilla right, that's a good ice cream company.
Absolutely. So, I mean, this is, again, I mentioned this year, Schulz is talking a lot about bodily pain and, aging, and Snoopy talking about internal bleeding and stuff. and here we are, too old. So that's a continuing theme, I think, in the work. He's dealing with issues of being a little older, and of course, and then on the newspaper strip, imagine all these younger people coming up, right?
Yeah,
and he probably has heard a person or two saying, "Oh, Peanuts, that's dull, that's boring, that's so old. I like Bloom County, I like Kathy," or whatever was going on at the time.
Yeah. Oh, I think there's a lot of that. I totally agree that he is. What's interesting is I feel like in some ways the characters this year are more than ever, as you say, reflecting his genuine feelings on the thing. But what's interesting and cool about it, I think, is they're also still very much themselves.
Yeah.
You feel like these are real, fully fleshed out characters, but also a part of him. You really get that sense this year.
He's got a really rich world that he's playing in right now. Yeah.
And you know what? All this talking about ice cream, though, makes me think I want to get a snack. So we're going to take a break here. You guys can go get your own little snack, and then we'll come back in a few and do some more comic strips. And we'll talk about Nancy. All right. We'll be back.
Hi, everyone. You've heard us rave about the Estabrook Radio 914. And what episode would be complete without mention of the Fab Four? Now you can wear our obsessions proudly with Unpacking Peanuts t-shirts. We have a Be of Good Cheer pen nib design, along with the four of us crossing Abbey Road, and, of course, Michael, Jimmy, and Harold at the Thinkin' Wall. Collect them all, trade them with your friends. Order your t-shirts today at unpackingpeanuts.com/store.
And we're back. So Liz, hanging out in the mailbox. Do we got anything?
Yes. Harold got a message from Fernando Ruiz, pro cartoonist and instructor at the Joe Kubert School. He says, "I've recently started binging Unpacking Peanuts, and I've been loving it. I'm a lifelong Peanuts fan, a collector of the Fawcett paperbacks and the Fantagraphic books. I've been enjoying revisiting these strips and historical commentary. Great job."
Oh, well, thank you for that. We're loving doing it. So glad. I love hearing people binge it. That's very satisfying, the thought of that.
Yeah. But yeah, Fernando's a super, super talented artist. His last name's Ruiz, R-U-I-Z. Check his stuff out, guys. It's really, he's done a variety of work for a number of different publishers, and now he's teaching the next generation. So it's pretty cool.
That is very, very cool. We got a voicemail from super listener Shaylee Robson.
Hey guys, I just want to say thank you for having me come check out the behind the scenes footage for the Unpacking Peanuts podcast. And also, for any of you guys who want to give the gang a call, because Jimmy obviously worries, please give him a call at 717-219-4162. Again, that is 717-219-4162.
So thank you for writing, Shaylee. You're welcome. We're happy to have you back. Listen to us. And if you guys want to be able to listen to us talk live and in person, we do quarterly events about. Is that right, Liz?
Mm-hmm.
Every couple months. For our Patreon supporters. So if you want to go to our website, unpackingpeanuts.com, you could kick in a couple bucks or whatever, and you'll be invited to our next one. We did a few hangouts, and this week we had done, or not this week, but last week we had some guests just listen to us while we recorded an episode, and that was fun. I like the hangouts more than just them listening, because that makes me very, very nervous. Knowing that I know people will be listening later, but that's after Liz fixes it.
Yeah, that's what I liked. They wrote back and said, I can't believe how much editing Liz has to do.
Right? Now we know, right? It's so true.
So, okay, so that's that. If you want to reach out to us, you can just shoot us an email. We're unpackingpeanuts@gmail.com. We would absolutely love to hear from you. And you can also give us a call, and that's available 24/7. Just leave a message. Make sure you identify yourself, and you can hear yourself on this podcast. And please call, because like Shaylee says, if I don't hear, I worry. Okay, so that wraps up the mailbag, but I just want to now say I have done my homework. I spent about an hour reading Nancy strips. For those of you who aren't, who might not remember from last week, Unpacking Peanuts, friend of the podcast, guest of the podcast, Todd Webb, was at an event at the Billy Ireland Museum out there in Columbus, Ohio. And it was called Nancy Fest, where it was the first one ever. They celebrated the work of Ernie Bushmiller's famous comic strip, Nancy, which I have gone on record a lot as disparaging. And by the way, I thought it was mostly me, but Michael has disparaged a little bit too.
Oh.
So it's not just me.
It's the anti-peanuts.
Right, the anti-peanuts. So Todd Webb took it upon himself. He went around to the convention people at Nancy Fest and had them call the hotline. And it was great people. Bill Griffith, creator of Zippy the Pinhead, Dennis Kitchen, legendary indie comics publisher. Who else? John Porcellino, a zine publisher for 30 years now. All kinds of great people, all kinds of people that we dig. So they called Defending Nancy. So I decided, all right, in deference to the love people have of this, I will read some Nancy, and I will read it with the eyes of thinking this is going to be great. I'm going to go in with my eyes and heart open to the genius of Ernie Bushmiller. I read about an hour's worth of them, and they were okay. I did enjoy them. So here's my book report on it. And then I chose one that we will read and give the Unpacking Peanuts treatment together. And you guys feel free to jump in and tell me if any of this is resonating with you or not. Having read these Nancys, my problem that I had previously going into it has a lot to do with the surface level look of Nancy. I personally don't vibe with the character design. So I think that is something that kept it at arm's length for me. So I ignored that. And here's sort of what my takeaway is. If you want to enjoy Nancy, the vibe that you have to have going into it, he is not really concerned with characters at all. The characters they have defined character traits, but they're not like real people. They are doing the thing in the strip to facilitate the gag. Much more like chess pieces on a board than, say, the Peanuts characters. It feels like there is a version of Sluggo and there's a version of Nancy and all and they exist to facilitate the gag. The gag is the most important thing. So I would also go in and say, oh, okay, well, Nancy is behaving in a way that I think is ridiculous or I mean, it's silly to say non-naturalistic or whatever, but that, something that seemed forced or whatever. But when you go into it and think, oh, no, he knows it's forced. He knows she's behaving in a weird way that no one would do. That's part of the appeal. Once I anyway had that little bit of insight or whatever you would say, that angle on looking at the strips, I enjoyed them a lot more. And I understand too the formal aspects of it, the fact that it is cartooning reduced almost to a diagram, which something like, which obviously would have influenced people like Chris Ware or whatever. So yeah, I understand the appeal. I really understand why all those people who called in, I understand definitely why they like it. And I have much more respect for it now, but I'm also going to pick on it because it's just fun punching up. I mean, the guy has a whole convention after him, Nancy Fest. It's fun to punch up. There's no fun giving the finger to some random person on the street. There's a lot of fun giving the finger to Gene Simmons at Comic-Con. That's just sort of where I live. But I will tone it down in terms of Nancy because I appreciate it more than I did. So, guys, do you have any Nancy thoughts before we look at the one strip I chose?
Sure. Okay, I've been reading comics. It was part of my life since the mid-50s. And I never liked Nancy. It was just flat out not funny. I didn't have to think about it. I'd read Little Abner and there'd be these vibrant characters. And I'd read Nancy. And it's a setup for a joke. That's all it is.
Right.
And so I haven't really given it much thought. I was just like, this is terrible. I never laughed once. Now, it's possible. I mean, the strip's been running a long time. There might have been large periods which were great. And actually, probably it started out as Nancy was just a side character. And then, so, going back to the 30s. So maybe that stuff was great. I don't know. It's just my experience with Nancy is this is not for me. He's writing for, Red Skelton's audience, maybe.
Harold, what about you?
Well, it's interesting in terms of appeal. We talked about having polls for comic strips really starting in the 80s, and we got to see who liked what. And there were a lot of surprises, I think, for, say, people who were cartoonists, which strips really were. We kind of knew which ones were in the most newspapers, and sometimes we'd scratch our heads over certain strips. And Nancy was in a lot of newspapers. But I think the biggest indicator of the appeal of Nancy, not just to artists, but to the general public, was that she was on the cover of comic books. I mean, and often these were collections of multiple strips, but Nancy was the one they chose, say, for Tip Top Comics. She would be the character on the front, Nancy and Sluggo, because she was going to sell the comic book. And so this would be back in the 1940s, 1950s. There were Nancy comics into the 1960s that were selling, including the Peanuts comic.
That's right.
Was in the comics. And there was also one called Sparkler. There's actually 2 different books, I believe, that had Nancy in them and featured in them, if I'm remembering correctly. And Schulz Peanuts in its early years was the backup strip to Nancy. And that gives you some sense of how Nancy appealed to the average American reader, and particularly children. And so there's obviously something there that Bushmiller was doing in the world of children's strips that was resonating, and it was working. I mean, for you to spend you can read it in the paper and okay, it's there, but you spend your dime as a little kid and you bought a Nancy comic, you like Nancy. Mm. You like to see children that looked like you in the comics or whatever it was, or you like the design.
Whoa, wait, what kids look like that? Wait, those kids need to see a doctor. That's big problems.
Anyway, the appeal of Nancy was unquestionably there all during its period. It wasn't like it was just got into a newspaper and never went away, because we know there's strips that are like that once it's in there, even if very few people are actually following it and enjoying it, and the fact that it was appealing mostly to children actually made it, I think, vulnerable in the comics page, because they weren't vocal enough to be able to say, hey, if you pull this, I'm going to end my subscription because they didn't have that clout,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at this one strip and we'll discuss it. Have to figure out. I have no idea when this was. It doesn't matter. It was January 14th of some year.
62.
All right, January 14th, 1962.
So this is the heart of Peanuts greatness.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So, all right. So picture this was in the newspaper at the same time as, actually like a few years after things like weed claustrophobia. Right. Mm-hmm. So Peanuts, Snoopy's already on top of the doghouse. He's not a flying ace yet, but that's where we are. And in Nancy is in her living room and she sees, she has a miserable look on her face. And she comes over to the corner where she sees a little case containing a musical instrument, and it is a violin. Panel 2, she starts practicing the violin, and we see some really ragged and dissonant looking notes coming from the violin, and Nancy's scraping away on it with this just look of pure anger on her face. And then in the next panel, she says, "Boy, how I hate to practice." And we see her Aunt Fritzy Ritz behind her reading the newspaper. And for the next several panels, Nancy is just hacking away, just sawing away at that violin with a real look of just misery on her face. Later that night, she's in bed, also still looking miserable. It seems like it could be hours later. But then in the next panel, she wakes up, or she doesn't wake up, but she's startled because she hears something. "I hear a noise downstairs," she says. And then she goes down to see what the noise is, and it is in fact a burglar who is sneaking out the window. And Nancy approaches him with the violin and bow and says, "Psst, take it." And the burglar says, "No, I don't want it." And then in the last panel, we see Fritzy Ritz coming out of her room and saying to the burglar, "Please."
Yep.
So,
well read.
Yeah. So what I'm talking about is like that middle tier. I would, with the wrong set of eyes, I would just find like annoying because it doesn't seem like any kind of reasonable thing a person would do. But then I realized, well, that is the joke, is that no one is even making her practice. No one even wants her to practice, but she does it for like an ungodly amount of time. So if you think about it, that's very cute and that's very funny. And I think it's funny that the aunt comes out at the end and says, no, take it.
And the aunt doesn't seem all that concerned that this guy just stole everything in the house.
Right. It's worth it. Just get rid of the violin.
Yeah. From my memory of Nancy it's all a setup for a joke, but all the characters that are needed to facilitate the joke are just the clearest stereotypes.
Right.
So if it's going to be a druggist, it's going to be the stereotype of a druggist. So it's going to be a policeman, and this is a burglar. So if this is for little kids, that's what a burglar's always looked like in cartoons and comics for 40 years.
Yeah, the Beagle Boys and
the little raccoon mask around his eye.
Yeah.
So the joke doesn't make sense because basically nobody seems to care that the burglar's in the house stealing all their stuff.
Well, isn't that what makes the joke funny?
That's what burglars do. They're not even surprised there's a burglar in the house.
Yeah, what Harold says, I think, is the thing. You have to switch your brain to Nancy mode if you want to, if you don't have to, to choose to go, the absurdity of all of it, combined with the fact that it looks like a diagram and is emotionless, is the joke. And you're either going to, that's the other problem with talking about not just Nancy, but Peanuts, any kind of humor. You either laugh at it or you don't.
Yeah. No, but Peanuts gets absurd. And, we've pointed out when it gets way absurd, but the absurdity comes out of the characters.
Yeah.
You wouldn't see an adult in Peanuts, but I don't know how we deal with this joke if presented with that idea.
Well, the one it makes me think of is Peppermint Patty in the waterbed when her, when her house is getting robbed. And the reaction of that is, first off, it's the opposite of this kind of cartooning because it's so lively and, expressive. And it is the jokes are coming out of Peppermint Patty's personality, Marcy's personality, Snoopy's. Yeah.
Yeah. And you wouldn't expect Nancy to be able to play music because she's a person who doesn't have any feelings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, looking at this from a design standpoint, this is 1962. The Nancy logo in the upper left-hand corner looks like, best way to describe it for me is it would be a car emblem,
Yes.
on a 19,
Yes.
Chevy Bel Air or something. It's got,
Yep.
it's pretty cool looking, actually.
Yeah, it is cool looking.
And then by Ernie Bushmiller on the bottom is done in a style that I think very much of the 20s, late 20s.
Yeah.
Kind of Art Deco-y, which is kind of cool. And the by, even that is kind of this little weird serif-y thing that's also its own thing. And then he draws a little 90-degree turned letter P, which is like just a little, again, like a little chevron or something that he's put in there. That's a nice design. I like that.
Oh, yeah.
And then you look at the house, everything is very clean lines. You see the baseboards, you see the cleanly defined wall. There's a little frame that has a picture that you can't see because of the reflection of the glass. You've got these remarkable pillows that are some neat colors of green and orange and black. And the other one, it looks like it's just this black stripe. And it's not a fully rounded pillow. On the left, he's put some little angle on the pillow as if that's the edge where, I don't know if there's a zipper or whatever, but he's not just, he's thinking about stuff as he's designing. And the thing that I like the most in that panel is the case for this violin. He's got a black violin case, and then he has a distinct white line curving from the top of the where the top of the violin would be down to the double curve of the violin case. That's a really nice piece of art and design there. So
yeah,
then I mean, and everything is like you say, it's clean, it's iconic, and I think that's a big part of the appreciation, like you were saying, the formalist nature of this, boiling down the essence of what a comic strip can be because it's all icons. This is a strip loaded with icons, and icons that are uniquely Ernie Bushmiller's, but also, like you say, taking off on things that everybody gets because comics have been around for a while. So you know what the burglar looks like, and he's living into this. And then Fritzi Ritz, she was the star of this comic initially when it came out. I guess was in the 30s. I don't know what the first year of it was, or if it even went back to the 20s. But
no, I think it's the 20s even, right? Because wasn't she like a flapper?
Yeah.
And she's wearing a hairstyle that I would say was early 40s that she hasn't changed in, and
like Lois Lane almost looking.
Yeah, it's a cool look, but it's out of time. At this point, the strip is out of time. Now, maybe it wasn't originally. Maybe it seemed like it was of its time, but now you got this super iconic, out of time, designy artwork with these characters, and then he's doing something where he's telling a joke in the most clear, simple, elemental way. Now, to a lot of people, particularly probably people that read a lot of comics, some of them are going to read that as, you're not going to surprise me because the way you're doing this is so formalist, it's not going to be funny. And that's usually, I think, the way I would read the comic even when I was little, is I wouldn't expect to laugh, but I would understand, I would comprehend. And that sometimes was just enough, I'm comprehending a story that I didn't know before. And what really strikes me about this particular strip that you picked, Jimmy, is I find the last two panels, after all the formalism, there are a couple little surprises in here that are actually kind of funny. The fact that Nancy is offering her violin to this burglar, risking herself in doing so, is she's doing something a little bit surprising, right? I wouldn't have thought that this is what Nancy was going to do, given that she's this domestic kid in the household, and she's going to come up to a burglar, and she's going to offer her violin. The problem is she should have offered it with the case. Then he might have taken it because he could have.
Yeah, you can't resell it if you don't have the case. Come on,
the bow might just not the cat gut's not going to get all the way across town when he's jumping fences and stuff. But
that's
anyway.
True.
And the strangest artwork in here, design wise, is his bag. Because it looks like he stole a bunch of grapefruits, and
he picked up all those oranges.
It's the man fruit
right. That's right. He had picked up the oranges in the street. He really wasn't stealing at that point. He just likes to break into people's houses. But
maybe he was leaving some oranges.
Maybe.
And fortunately, there's no glass in the window.
Yeah, right. Or that's the world's tallest window, and we got some 12-foot ceilings here. But yeah, it's so iconic. But that bag in particular does not look like the typical bag. If you're talking about iconography, this is kind of an unusually, maybe not particularly well drawn piece of it, when everything else was pretty much on the nose for what you might expect. A hand, a dress, an arm, a hair bow would look. But that's kind of the odd piece, which is a new piece, which is interesting. He's adding something that he probably doesn't normally draw, and he's struggling, which gives me some sense of what kind of an artist he was. He had to work to get to these icons. That's the sense I get. And he would get better and better at it because he maybe wasn't a natural artist in the sense that you would expect a gesture drawing artist to be. In the last panel with Fritzy Ritz, I mean, it's brilliantly done on the color side, because we have this light blue for darkness on the inside when it's nighttime with the burglar in the last two panels. And everybody is blue except for the beam of the flashlight, which is in the last panel shining on Fritzy Ritz with a yellow, and she's full color. Mm-hmm. That's a really arresting, wonderful last panel that I think is brilliant from a design perspective. And I like Fritzy Ritz's expression. There's some real personality in that expression. She looks annoyed, and she looks insistent in a way that could have been with much less, I don't know, explanation of what she's feeling. So kudos to Ernie Bushmiller for that.
Maybe it's possible that he wanted to strip out a flapper and get into like 20s society and culture. And then all of a sudden, all the readers are writing in like, we want to see more of Nancy.
Yeah,
and
I think
he
so.
Actually didn't want it. He wanted a flapper strip. Maybe he was a good artist in those days. And he has to do 50 years of this ugly character.
Well, it does seem like over the years, more and more and more and more, even with Nancy's design, it becomes more and more pristinely iconic. And I think that's part of a part of the appeal to some of the people who are into comics from a design standpoint and what makes them so unique. And there is some distinctly unique things about Nancy that are like the quintessential this or the quintessential that I think must send some artists over the moon. Say, this guy's amazing,
I've got to compare it not to Peanuts, but to Little Lulu, which was a great strip.
Okay.
And it's
very similar.
And it seemed to have, it's similar in some ways, but it had this anarchic quality to it, where these kids are going wild and having weird fantasies about witches and getting into trouble. They had a lot of personality. And to me, that's what a kid strip could be.
Yeah. Because that was originally a Saturday Evening Post, I think single panel, usually comic with maybe two colors. It'd be like black and red, and done by Marjorie Henderson Buell. And then it was popular enough, just appearing in one magazine, that Dell Comics licensed it, and they started to create their own Little Lulu comics. And then John Stanley, the artist and writer, a lot of people really like him as well. Very similar. He was very good at creating simple, clean, iconic characters with Little Lulu. I think it's a really interesting mix. But yeah, from the story side, he does go into some slightly crazier places with this than you see with Nancy, for sure.
All right, so that's Nancy. I guys, thank you so much, everybody. Raina Telgemeier called Raina's dad. I hope you're no longer mad at me for not liking Nancy.
You could be mad at me if you want.
There you go. Be mad at Michael. Here's what because I didn't grow up with it, I'll never love it. I appreciate it. I appreciate that you guys love it. And here's something I do love. The one thing I do love is the fact that there is a convention in these United States of America that is dedicated to one cartoonist. Nancy Fest, that is awesome. If I have one goal in what's left of my life, is I would like to recenter the cartoonist in this entire medium. Take it away from the idea of intellectual properties and corporate icons and really center it to the men and women who actually created this art that we love so much. So shout out to the Billy Ireland for doing Nancy Fest. Shout out to Todd Webb for facilitating this conversation and getting all those great people to write in or call in and tell us about their love for Nancy. So now shut up about it.
I'm going to put this strip in the obscurity so that people can take a look at it.
Fantastic. All right, let's get back to Peanuts. June 19th. Snoopy is doing some aerobics in front of the TV. Man, is it the 80s. He's got his little sweatband on and everything. And the TV is saying, right leg, left leg, left leg. Swing your arms, lift your knees. Snoopy's doing exactly that in the next panel. In the third panel, he's continuing to exercise as the TV says, now just relax your breathing and let all the tension go out of your body. Which he does. And in panel 4, he is reduced to just a few squiggly lines on the floor that barely register as Snoopy.
Yeah, I picked this because that's just great cartooning.
Wow,
I mean, it's not, you can't think of that as realistic. It's like he was a balloon and you let all the air out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it also looks so rumpled and rough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this goes along with that theme of bodily pain and suffering that's all through this year.
Yeah.
I noticed in June that the lettering on some of the strips was like the most torturous I've ever seen in Peanuts. I was like, oh man, he's really suffering here.
Is there an example in this particular strip or just?
No, not in this strip. If you go back to June 5th, if anybody's following along, take a look at the lettering of Linus and Snoopy the lawyer, and it says, excuse me. And I was like, oh my gosh, he is struggling.
The fact that he stuck with the dip lettering pen, like I'm crazy. I'll sit and actually hand letter stuff, but I won't sit and hand letter with a dip pen. I mean, it adds an entire another level of struggle to it. Obviously, it's what he learned, what he started out as a letterer. So, I mean, he's not going to change. But well into the 80s, he certainly could have found something, I think, that would have. Maybe not. I mean, I don't know. It probably is.
It probably wasn't a better tool in the 80s than that.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, so Watterson was using a rapidograph, but like that's a very different line. It works great in Calvin and Hobbes, but you would notice it in Peanuts. Here's something I want to say. I think last episode, Harold, you were talking about going to the Steve Jeppe Museum and you'd see all the products. I'm looking at the TV here. It is a bummer. I know he used to just draw rectangular TVs, but all the stuff, the mid-century, 20th century design stuff, televisions, aims, chairs, it's interesting stuff to draw. Yeah. The closer we get to modernity, the less interesting things. Like, you ever have to draw an iPhone? Can't be done. Cannot be done. It's nothing. It's a black, rectangle. It's terrible.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, I'm just going back to that Nancy strip. We that was stuck in.
Don't go back to the Nancy strip.
Early
Nancy's
40s.
Dead to us.
It has. That's okay. All right, we can move on.
June 20th. Linus is sitting in the beanbag chair watching TV, and the TV says, "Fear can take control of our very lives." Linus is in the beanbag throughout this one as the TV continues. Fear of poverty, fear of illness. If you were to ask me what my greatest fear is, do you know what I'd say? And then Linus says, cancellation. Zing.
He's talking to the TV. This is not a good sign.
He's being snarky there. Yeah. Yeah, and I think he's maybe seeing 40% of the screen with that beanbag set up.
That's all you need.
His feet are...
right, this fear-mongering on television, though, in 1986, boy, how little, it seemed bad, I think, to Schulz at this point, that he points out the guy on TV is only really afraid of being canceled. But, 40 years later, it's worse. Yeah. June 21st, Snoopy and Woodstock are atop the doghouse, and Snoopy says to Woodstock, long hair is out, short hair is in. Woodstock contemplates this, and then in the third panel, he flies away. And in the fourth panel, Woodstock comes back with a buzz cut, and a very distraught Snoopy says, on the other hand, maybe I was wrong.
That's a great look.
That is a great look.
That's my tattoo.
Michael, what do you think about this alternating Zipatone panels with the doghouse?
It's weird, but it doesn't interfere with anything.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
You just accept it.
What do you think, Harold?
Yeah, I just think of Shoe again, the comic strip Shoe with its really broad, brushy lines for trees and backgrounds and things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's true. The 80s, long hair was in the 70s and into the early 80s. And yeah, when I was in college, my freshman year, I was 84. It was 84, and short hair was not a thing, but the barber in Greencastle, Indiana that I went to
I know this story.
certainly thought long hair was an abomination. He'd been living in this small town for years and fighting the hippies. And boy, when I came in and I was shaggy because I had waited, I'm away at college. I'm responsible for my own hygiene. And I'm finally like, I've got to get my hair cut. So I go to the local barber, and he puts me in the chair, puts the thing around my neck, the apron, and he doesn't ask any questions. He just starts on the back of the neck with a razor. And I hid in my room for about a day until I could come to terms with what had just happened. But I was just maybe a hair ahead of my, I guess, pardon the pun, of what was actually going to happen in the culture when short hair finally came back. It was really interesting.
Yeah, although it leads to the wishy-washy of the 80s, and by that I'm also including me, to end up with a mullet.
Right? You can't make up your mind.
Right, you can't quite decide.
We had the best of both worlds.
Or the worst.
Michael didn't have a haircut for 35 years. He cut his own hair because somebody destroyed his hair when you were 14?
No, well, no, I had a similar experience to Harold. It was just like I was in LA. I hadn't cut my hair in 5 years, and I went to a barber, and he just scalped me just like that, and I was humiliated.
Yeah.
And I hid in my room for a while. But I didn't realize I was trendy.
What year was that?
It would have been around mid 80s.
In 1993, I went for my college. It was my college yearbook picture, and I went and got a haircut beforehand. And the haircut I came out with was, I don't know if anyone remembers the episode of Seinfeld where he gets the little boy haircut from the barber and is humiliated by it. It was the exact haircut. So bad, so bad.
So we have pictures. It was just something to go into the Peanuts obscurities.
I actually had to get my hair. No, because I got the picture taken and absolutely not. And then they did reshoots 3 weeks later, and I went back for reshoots. I'm like, no way.
Oh, wow.
I looked like a Cub Scout. July 1st. Sally is on the phone and she says, hello? No, I can't. Not tomorrow. And in panel 3, she's settled in for the conversation and says, yeah, the dentist. In the last panel, she says, I have to go have my teeth criticized. I just picked this because that punchline made me laugh.
It's great.
And it makes me laugh because I really think Sally would think of it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's true. Most people will kind of mask things a little bit if they're going to say something bad.
Right.
The dentist won't. I got to have to pull them all out.
Right.
These are the worst teeth I've ever seen.
Yeah, well, it was those little pink tablets they would give you would be the worst. It was, this will show everything you are not doing right if any red shows up.
And it would always look like a bloodbath.
Right.
I forgot about
brushing with a Q-tip. What?
Now, looking at these black shadows in those first two panels, that's what I was talking about earlier. That it makes it feel like this might be an evening at home. Some harsh shadows illuminated by a lamp on a table or something.
I think he's getting really comfortable with this new shading.
Is it Frank Miller look? I think he was.
Yeah.
I love the telephone cord too.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting line. It's not what you would typically expect you would draw, and it looks fantastic.
Thinking about Shoe, is it actually possibly Bill Malden that he's pulling some of that editorial style, because that looks like a brush to do the phone cord.
Yeah, I don't know what he's using. The only reason I think, even though he loves Malden and thinks he's the bee's knees, Schulz seems to be very trying to stay
current
in the moment.
Yeah.
And now Malden is a editorial cartoonist, and so was Jeff McNelly, who did Shoe. So they're from that same world. But Shoe was the one that made it to the newspaper strips that were side by side with Schulz. So that's why I was thinking he might be eyeing that, looking at the page going, how do I compete in this page? Because as we know, he was a very competitive artist all the way through his life.
And the needs for how to compete now are different than they were at the beginning.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like we said before, he influenced so much stuff that all of a sudden maybe half the strips or a third of the strips in the newspaper were emulating him.
Right.
And he was trying to stand out with really spare lines and a lot of white space. And then all of a sudden there's a lot of spare lines with white space all around him. And he's like, maybe I should start putting those blacks in.
Yep. July 3rd. Linus is in the living room watching some TV in the famous beanbag chair. Lucy comes in and says, Mom says to turn off the TV and go to bed. In panel 3, we see Linus has hoisted up the beanbag chair over his shoulder. And in panel 4, we see he has gone to bed and he is asleep in the beanbag chair with the beanbag chair in his bed.
Right. This is totally Linus. I mean, it's the beanbag chair is incredibly comfortable. Just put it in the bed. It's original thinking.
I love that last panel drawing wise. I think that's a great that's like Japanese. It's like the wave, the composition of this, right? It's a perfect composition.
It's really nice. He's probably just dreaming of prime time.
Probably. All right. So, it looks like we're going to be doing maybe 4 episodes of 1986 because I think we're going to have to call it right here. You guys okay with that?
Sure.
Yep.
All right. I've been really enjoying this. So I hope you guys out there are enjoying following along. I think we're on a real upswing here in 1986. And some of the best stuff of this year is coming up next episode. So come back then. In the meantime, if you want to keep the old conversation going, there's a few ways you can do it. The first thing you can do is you can send us an email. And that email address is unpackingpeanuts@gmail.com. You can also follow us on social media. On Instagram and Threads, we're at Unpack Peanuts. And on Facebook, Blue Sky, and YouTube, we're at Unpacking Peanuts. Also, if you want to read my new comic, Tanner Rocks, gvillecomics.substack.com. It's free. I'd love to see you there.
Is that G hyphen? Or?
Nope, it is GVILLE.
Okay.
gvillecomics.substack.com. It's a free monthly comic, so check that out. You guys have anything else you want to say here at the end that want to plug?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind anybody who might be in the Pennsylvania area that Blobfest, if you listening to this before Saturday, July 13th, I will be with my wares in my tent in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania at the Blobfest, selling my goods. And then on Sunday, something that I riffed Mystery Science Theater style, Beware the Blob, is playing in the afternoon as part of the celebration of the classic 1958 Blob movie, where it was shot in Phoenixville, including the movie theater in which it was featured. So it's a great event. It's a load of fun. Come out. There's a lot of good reasons to be there.
Do they still do the thing where they reshoot the scene of people running out of the theater with people there from that day and incorporate it?
Yes. For years on Friday night, they will get everybody to dress up. They try to get them to dress up in period 1958 costume, and you can sign up to be the run out. It's one of the first things that sells out at the Blobfest is to be one of the people that gets to run out while they shoot the the image. So they've got pictures from every year of Blobfest, people doing the run out.
That is very cool.
And I think they've added a second run out on Saturday. I might be wrong about that for the first time. So anyway, yeah, if you like that stuff, come out. It's a lot of fun.
It's a great little Pennsylvania town you'll enjoy as well. So that is it for this week. I had so much fun. Can't wait for next week. Please come back then. right in the meantime, because if I don't hear, I worry. Other than that, for Michael, Harold, and Liz, this is Jimmy saying, be of good cheer.
Yes. Be of good cheer. Unpacking Peanuts is copyright Jimmy Gownley, Michael Cohen, and Harold Buchholz. Produced and edited by Liz Sumner. Music by Michael Cohen. Additional voiceover by Aziza Shakrala Clark. For more from the show, follow Unpack Peanuts on Instagram and Threads. Unpacking Peanuts on Facebook, Blue Sky, and YouTube. For more about Jimmy, Michael, and Harold, visit unpackingpeanuts.com. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for listening.
I'll be a sellout.